That is going, okay. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a couple minutes before 2, and I'm gonna get things kicked off a little bit. This is gonna be a very different kind of session compared to the first 2. We're gonna ask you all to unmute. We're gonna ask to see your faces. We're gonna be using breakout rooms and the chat feature in sort of interactive ways, so I hope you'll find that engaging and fun. And a great way to finish up our sessions today with the 2nd annual Miami Valley Climate Change Seminar. I'm Matt Lindsay. I'm with the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. I'm our Manager of Environmental Planning, and I've been our host throughout the day for the various sessions. I hope you were able to catch some or both of the 2 earlier sessions from today. This is the final session of the day. It is our Inroads Climate Solutions Simulation game, and we are pleased to have Karen Jeffers-Tracy and Steve Schlather. Schlather, which is it? Schlather.
Steve is good.
Steve and Karen are here today as our facilitators for the Inroads simulation. I'll read a.
Hey, Matt, I don't see Karen back on yet.
You're right. Okay.
I mean, we can go out. Now, the first part is I'm talking about this day. We can
Right.
go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Hopefully,
just...
Karen will be joining us soon. Okay, so Steve Schlather is a group leader for the Springfield chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. He's completed the Climate Reality Leader training and the Inroads Climate Ambassadors training. Professionally, Steve spent 27 years as a reporter for newspapers in Texas and Ohio, and 10 years as a recycling and waste reduction educator for the Clark County Solid Waste District here in Ohio, before retiring in 2018. Our other presenter today is scheduled to be Karen Jeffers-Tracy. Karen Jeffers-Tracy is a climate science educator and adult services public librarian in the Greene County Library System. Astonished why humanity has not yet mounted an appropriate emergency response to the climate emergency unfolding above our heads, she created a climate listening project, collecting information initially from 200 people, now several more hundred than that, engaging them in climate conversation to identify exactly what they didn't understand about the climate change issues. She has several different games and presentations for civic groups, city councils, churches, and other groups available. Jeffers-Tracy can be contacted at an email address that we will drop in the chat. Karen, are you here yet? I don't see her. Anyway, we have an ambitious agenda for this session, an ambitious schedule, which I have printed out in front of me. There's Karen. Thank you, Karen. And Karen, you have just been made also a co-host, so you'll be able to share your screen as well. If you are both ready, then Steve and Karen, you can get started with, I guess, Steve, we're starting with Steve and an introduction.
Right. So the Inroads Climate Workshop is an interactive group exercise where people work together to test solutions to climate change. The Inroads simulator was made using the best available science to test the effectiveness of different proposals for addressing climate change. Our purpose here is that you'll build your understanding of climate change through interactive learning, and that will guide you in taking effective action. So what we're going to do is Karen's going to lead us in a brief introduction to explain how the simulator works, and we'll show the model in action as we do this. Then we're going to ask you to make suggestions for different actions to address climate change, and we'll try them on the simulator and see how they work. We'll be putting you in breakout rooms a few times to discuss different ideas in small groups, and we'll ask you to share your thoughts by typing them in the chat. And after we work with the simulator for 30 minutes or so, we'll take some time to debrief and reflect on the thoughts and feelings that this process brings up. And then we'll close by thinking about the actions we can take based on what we've learned and show you how to use the simulator for further learning. Anybody have any questions about any of those plans? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and I'm going to start to share my screen to show you the simulator.
First, we have the breakout.
Right.
Do you want to do that now, Karen?
Yes, we're going to start with a breakout where it's just going to be 4 minutes and 2 to 3 people per room. The most important thing is that each person gets a chance to speak. So make sure you allocate at least a minute per person to speak. If they're just not speaking, then you can sit there and smile at them because that's their minute. I want to see some good listening. This will help us to kind of ground ourselves in why we're doing this work. So the question that I'd like you to consider in your breakout room is how climate change is affecting you now personally, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, morally. Think about one of those ways and talk about that. Remember, this is about talking and listening, not back and forth interrupting, or enthusiastically overlapping, but listening. Everyone. So 4 minutes was shorter than you thought, wasn't it? I'm glad you got some sharing. Sometimes it's hard to focus on just, what does that mean to ourselves? Next, we're going to move into the introduction to the simulator. So you can show the simulator now, Steve.
Everybody see that?
Now, so
Yes.
this is available free for everyone to use on the Climate Interactive website. We'll be giving you all those links at the end. But it was developed by Climate Interactive in collaboration with MIT Sloan. It's a very useful tool with, as Steve said, tremendous research to back it up. It's used by heads of state and United Nations as a tool in climate negotiations. And now it's open and available for other people to use. We're going to use sort of the surface of it, the simple version of it, but we'll show you a few of the open buttons where you can go deeper into it, and you can see how it could be very complex once you play with it some more. But it's free on the site and able to be played with. So it does 14,000 calculations per second. What it is as we put in our climate solutions. So for instance, maybe we want to increase energy efficiency. Maybe we want to plant more trees. Maybe we want to, you can show them how the sliders work. So as we say some of our solutions, the sliders will bring down the temperature of the planet. So the black line is business as usual. If we don't bring down our emissions, what will happen? In 80 years, we'll be at plus 3.5 degrees C. That's 6.3 Fahrenheit. That's below, see the little number? And just to sort of start out, with a kind of just a refresher on what's the big deal with a 3.6 degree world. Steve's going to show some slides of is this where we do the slides? Yeah.
Yep, I got to pull
Yeah,
them up.
he's going to show the slides of just a four slides, just as a refresher. What does the business as usual scenario look like?
So this is a image of Wall Street in New York City, what it looks like today. And excuse me. And then this is what it would look like in 80 years if we do get 4 degrees of warming, with the water totally submerging the street. And then this slide here shows the city of London with 4 degrees of warming by the end of the century. And you can see that it's not the building, only the high buildings are up out of the water, and the roads are pretty much submerged. And then this is a slide of a wildfire in California. And you just note the information that climate-related disasters cost the world $650 billion between 2016 and 2018. And if we continue, just by the time we reach 1.5 degrees centigrade of warming, we would expect damages of around 54 trillion in total. So that's just a reminder of some of the things that confront us if we stay on the path we're on. So I'll go back to the simulator now.
Oh, well, now right now we're going to talk about the stakeholders. The part of this workshop, which is involving and participatory, is that you get to propose your solutions from the point of view of a stakeholder group, which means you can choose what stakeholder you would like. And I have a different ways to share that. Matt, you want to drop them in the chat? I also have a link to a Google Doc. It's just 6 one-paragraph descriptions of stakeholder groups, and you can choose what one you want to be. And the way you do that is you rename yourself in the participants list with the initial right before the stakeholder group. If you're able to do that, if not, that's fine. It'll still work either way. So I can drop them in the chat. There we go. There's the 6 stakeholder groups and the initials in front of them. And I encourage you to choose one that you can choose one that's comfortable for you today, or if you would like to sort of challenge and expand your learning, you know, grow through boldness, you can choose one that would be opposite to what you normally would think of yourself.
So like if I decide I want to do industry and commerce, I would go on my screen and rename myself. And then I could put the IC in front of my name.
Mm-hmm.
And that would indicate to everybody that that's the stakeholder group that I'm affiliating with. So you have to go up to the top right corner of your window that your image is in, and click on the 3 dots, and you should see a rename option.
Yes, so, and we have enabled everyone to be able to rename yourselves. And again, Karen has dropped the descriptions of each in the chat and the initials that go with them.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a link to a Google Doc, which also has all 6. So whichever's easier for you. So let's see, are people able to do that? Oh, well, I'd like you to keep your name if you can.
Well, I'm seeing a couple people changing their names, so that's good. We're getting started.
But some people are just putting the the initial and not their whole name. It'd be nice to at least have your first name after the initials. Yeah, great. That's interesting. Good. All right. Now, if you're having trouble or you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can just say it in your own head which one you're going to be when you're put in the breakout room. They're going to be randomly assigned breakout rooms, so you might be discussing with your own group, or you might be discussing with another group. But first, as a full group, Steve will want to see the sliders again, and now we'll talk about how the sliders work. We're going to learn how the sliders work while we play proposing solutions from our stakeholder group. So can I start by hearing someone from the land, forestry, and agriculture group? So who would like to, and turn your screen on if you can, or just unmute yourself and let us hear your proposal. What's your proposal for what you would like to try first as a climate solution? Someone from land, forestry, and agriculture.
Hello.
Hi.
This is Gage Bradford. So I picked LFA because I was going away from my current field and just trying to manipulate your interactions with the screen.
Good. So would you like to pick a climate solution? As you can see, there's land.
Trees.
Do you want more trees, or do you want to stop cutting trees? Which one?
Stop cutting.
Okay, so Steve, as you see, is going to move the slider. It helps you kind of wiggle the slider a lot so we can see where you are. There you go. So Steve is sliding deforestation. And so that's a little bit. Land, forestry, and agriculture, is that enough for you? You're going to put some more in?
I think we need to move the line a little bit more, but you know, you're going to have to use some more.
I think we need, okay, good. All right. So look at the temperature. What happened? It came down a little bit, didn't it? So.
And one thing we can do is we can undo to go back to the.
That's the business as usual, and this was the one. And then back to the one. the one solution. There
There.
we go. So about a 10. So now can we hear someone? Thank you, Land Forestry and Agriculture. Can someone speak up from the industry and commerce?
Well, that's what I picked. So I guess I can speak for us.
No, you're the leader. You can't speak for us. We have to have someone else. Someone from industry and commerce, please. Speak out. Give us an idea. All you have to say is one of these words underneath the list. Any of them actually work. You can say renewables. You can say energy efficiency. You know, if you're in industry and commerce, you might be interested in buildings and efficiency, huh? Electrification. Can you wiggle your mouse around some of those titles, Steve, so they can see what to pick? You can pick any of those. Anyone? No one wants to come on the screen and tell me, or just speak out. Do you have everyone solidly muted, Matt, or are they able to unmute themselves?
Yes, they are.
Okay. All right. Well, how
Well,
about
I'm not an IC, but I'm in CE. So
Okay.
I can go.
conventional energy?
I want to ramp up technological carbon removal 3/4 of the way up.
Okay, thanks. Conventional energy. They're offering to help to ramp up technological carbon removal. Okay, good.
And you'll see that took us down from 3.5 to 3.3. And also the other thing, kind of watch the mix of fuels on the left, see if that changes at all. I go back. And then I went a little farther to 3.2.
But you can see some of the mix of fuels, the green, the renewables grew when you made that change. And as you can see on the graph on the left, the green line is still very small on the date where we are today. So renewables are still a very small part of our energy mix. All right, how about someone else? Raise your hand or unmute yourself and say hello.
Jessica Hansen.
Great.
I was actually thinking about climate hawks, but I can do industry and commerce if you prefer.
You can do any one you want. We're ready for any.
So climate hawks, I was thinking to just, with that, you would have to go 100% nuclear.
So you want a big increase in nuclear power?
Correct.
Climate hawk.
Yep.
And so then we can
And
replay
possibly-
this change.
And possibly a decrease in coal.
I'm sorry, what was that second item?
Decreasing coal.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
And just to remind you, we started with the baseline at plus 3.6. So we've gotten, and our goal is to get down below 2.0. So we've gotten some part of the way there.
And some science and tech that was recently released from the United Nations says 1.5 should be a better goal. But we are already at 1.18. So that's almost 1.2, which leaves us like 0.3 of a point wiggle room, which that tells you why this climate is an emergency right now. All right, any other groups want to speak out? Can you raise your hand in the chat or just type it in the chat, something you want to try?
Okay, for IC, I want to oppose this reduction in coal and boost the efficiency in energy efficiency and transport.
So industry and commerce is opposing reducing coal and is boosting energy and transport, okay?
Okay, so we'll take away the limits on coal. and then go to energy. You said energy efficiency and transport.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And you'll notice that that did change the fuel mix a fair amount.
Well, okay. Okay. So you picture stakeholders and you're sort of under talk, someone suggests that we increase renewables under energy supply. So we need to increase the renewables. There are different ways you can do that on the simulator. One is by subsidizing them and then choosing how heavily to subsidize them. So Steve, can you make that happen? And go ahead and heavily subsidize them because we really want to get to some solutions here. Okay, so if we really subsidize renewables, you'll see the green wedge on the left grow bigger as a bigger part of our energy supply. And you'll see the blue line diverge from that business as usual, which is what we want. So 2.8, again, 2 degrees is our goal, but 1.5 is much better. And really, you're talking tremendous amounts of human suffering would be avoided between those 2 and 1.5. So we've gotten pretty far. This is really looking good. Can we hear from someone else? What other group?
Karen, there were a couple of comments in the
Oh,
chat.
good.
One would propose the additional planting of trees.
Okay, that's called afforestation.
Okay.
It was the deforestation. So we can.
And you know that seems pretty doable, right? So we can go ahead and maximize that.
So watch what happens with the blue line. We're at 2.8, and then we move this forward, and we go pretty high, and we haven't really affected the temperature. Let's see if we can go. So we had to go to really high growth in afforestation, even to get 1/10 of a degree reduction.
Okay.
Someone wants to bring down the population by a half due to pandemic. I certainly hope not. A half, that would be horrible, but we can lower the population a little through education.
Well, what the slider goes for is low growth in population.
Okay. Now, is
Another comment in the chat was to increase building energy efficiency.
Okay, so that's this here, buildings and industry and energy efficiency of buildings. Increase. We're getting closer to 2.
Energy efficiency has a big effect. I'm always surprised doing this, how much difference energy efficiency makes. Under
we were at 2.6, we did that. We went to 2.3.
Where do improvements in refrigeration gases fall under this model? Methane and other would be that one. We would reduce the methane and other emissions from other gases.
Do you want me to show them 3 dots just to give them a glimpse of that?
Yeah, although something like renewables would be better because you can see how to. It gives you when you want to start your change. You know, and do you want to start?
Go over. It's like all of these have these 3 dots, and if you click on the 3 dots, it tells you more detail about the assumptions and the parameters of what you're doing here. And you can fiddle with the, like, if you start a renewable subsidy, it can start this year, or you could have it start sooner out and have a stop year.
And as you change those, you can see the effect on, again, the temperature of the planet, which is our ultimate goal. So you can see if we start the change now, what will that affect, or if we delay. And of course, the world is at the moment still in delay mode.
And then when you're done kind of looking around at this, you just close that and you go back to seeing the slider the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next comment has to do with, and there's 2 in a row about this, transport electrification.
Okay, so transport is here and electrification is here. So this is like building more electric cars,
And
electrifying other
electrifying
things.
fleets, for instance.
Right.
And then maximizing electrification, that would be underneath
I didn't hear what you said.
that. Transport and electrification. So not just transport, but electrification of. Okay. Slow economic growth. There are movements to look at. There's definitely valuable to look into what a degrowth economy looks like and what the benefits are. Maybe going for growth happiness rather than gross domestic product. So now we're going to put you in a breakout room. And again, remember that play, a little bit of playfulness helps to maximize your learning and actually increase your cleverness. It awakens your cleverness and it opens you to new perceptions than you would normally have. So I'd like you to go into random breakout rooms again, Matt, and it's going to be and you don't have to put, it's just random breakout rooms, 2 to 3 people, or let's see, what do I want to do? Let's say 3 people per breakout room. If there's any left over, they can come on with us. I'd like you to just discuss some of these changes that we've had already. For instance, some obstacles. So you'll be still discussing from your stakeholder group. You'll say, well, if I was a conventional energy person, I would say this about what we've done so far, because we're at 2.1, which is pretty close to goal. But there may be opposition to, for instance, building more nuclear power plants, or there may be opposition, or maybe we're depending too much on carbon removal technologies, which are not actually real yet, able to be implemented at scale. So let's have those kind of discussions. I want you to discuss from your playful stakeholder group. All right. Please unmute yourself so we can have a little discussion here in the plenary session. And the discussion is about what sort of obstacles are there to some of these agreements. What kind of things came up as obstacles?
It didn't come up, but one of the things about population control and slow economic growth, those have to happen in first world countries far more than they do in developing countries. A lot of people try to think that if you slow population growth in poorer countries, that's a target. But the United States average impact on the environment by one American baby is a lot more than one Southeast Asian baby or one African baby, because we consume so much more.
Proportionally, very good point. Anyone else? We might also call these leverage points. We're looking at the leverage points from a systems perspective. This is, a complex interaction of various systems. So what are the leverage points? What are the possible
in our group, we were talking about the energy efficiency of buildings and how much of a difference that made in reducing the climate change. And I was pointing out that I'm the planning director for the city of Kettering, and we get pushback from the building industry about implementing new energy efficiency requirements because of expense. But at the same time, they are continuing to move forward with building energy efficiency. A couple of the groups have adopted their own energy efficiency methods, including LEEDs, but the education to the consumers is pushing them to do those. So the consumer is saying, well, I'll pay a little bit more up front because I know I'm going to get a rate of return after 5 years, rather than the building industry is just looking at what is the profit today.
Thank you. Anyone
No.
else? Yeah, Rick.
I was struck by the fact when we were playing with all the knobs and dials that no one thing is going to do it. It's going to be a whole range of fairly drastic changes to make the change in temperature. Wow. I hope we have the guts to do it. Or if we have the guts to make somebody else do it. I'm just joking on that, kind of.
Thank you. Anyone else? Quick, we're gonna move. We have to move along quick here, since this is. I have to say, this is a game that can last many hours. So we're doing it in 1 hour and 15 minutes right now, and just would like you to jump in and offer any other obstacles. For instance, you know, oh, can we go ahead and pull the simulator back up then, Steve? And I will finish up my segment, and then I'll move on to yours. So we've had some movement. We've brought the temperature of the planet down with a mix of activities. Are there any of these activities that have a lot of opposition? Is there any likelihood that some of them will be strongly opposed?
Yes, there's going to be pushback about new nuclear from a lot of old line environmentalists.
Excuse me, I'm New Line and I oppose it.
Well, see, that's what I mean. There's going to be pushback about nuclear.
Right. So what if we move nuclear down now and see what happens? Let's test it. Just a 1/10. Do you think we could make up that 1/10 anywhere else?
Yeah, could you raise the carbon price about 50% up the slider?
Still a moderate rise. Oh, look at that. 1.8. You know what, guys? We're almost down to 1.5. Do you want to go further?
Yeah, jack the carbon price up to very high.
Well, no, let's leave that and see if there's another mix we can do. Anyone else have a suggestion? Another mix.
How about reduce oil and coal?
Okay, can we reduce some oil and coal? And when you open up the coal button, you can choose different things. Like maybe you want to retire old plants, and then when do you want to retire them? And do you want to not build any new plants? And when do you want to start not building any new plants? So you have lots of choices in there in setting those goals. So I encourage you all to go and play with it, and also to attend some of the trainings. Let's reduce coal a little, Steve. Just slide it down. Whoa, we haven't got much of a change at this point. Because
one of the things you'll notice, because we already enacted a carbon price,
yep,
that's already had an effect on oil and gas.
Yep.
Oil, gas, and coal. So this is all a systems approach, and everything interacts with everything else. So we actually already did a lot of these sliders when we moved the carbon price slider.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of opposition to fracking, though. So maybe you should bring down the natural gas one just to make sure that that statement's made. Oh, that made a good one. Yeah, try reducing methane, it says. So over there on the right where it says methane and other. And I think that also is where you put like the factory farming of cows. How you try
agriculture changes and landfill use and things like that.
Yeah, when you open up that slider, you can choose different ones.
Where do you show changes in what we eat? The type.
That would also be in this area with diet.
More vegetarian, less meat.
Because that's a change in agriculture. If there's less meat production, then methane is reduced in the agriculture sector.
So we got to 1.5. We avoided that scenario, the pictures that we showed you in the beginning. And if you've read the book, The Uninhabitable Earth, you know that there's even more that you have just now avoided by bringing it down to the 1.5C scenario.
Oh, but Karen, I think there's going to be a lot of opposition to having a mandated low economic growth, and there may be equity issues result in that. I mean, you know, there are places that could use the growth. So what if we can't do that one?
Well, what if we can move it and see what happens? See if it is our 1.5 totally dependent on that? Is there any way to make up for the another tenth of a point then?
How
Also,
about building and electricity industry electrification?
there we go. That's a good one.
Touch that one. Okay.
Punch that one. Yeah. I'm also curious. I'm a little skeptical about the carbon removal technologies myself, because I just haven't seen any come to the fore that are scalable at this time. I just think it's too long for them to take an effect. So what if we bring that down? How much is that going to change? Oh, brother, we were really, oh dear. We were really relying on that. All right, is there anything any other sector is willing to do? To help
Increase bioenergy.
Bioenergy. There's that one over on the left. Yeah.
That's over here under energy supply.
Let's say moderately, because bioenergy has two sides.
Doesn't matter
Okay.
whether it's high or moderate. It doesn't make that much difference, if you'll notice.
Okay.
See, if it was 1.9 and we went all the way out to here, it was still 1.9.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Anything else we could do? We could, I guess, any other suggestions, anyone? Put it in the chat or speak out.
Well, what is new zero carbon? What is that about?
That's the idea that there will be some new energy source discovered that will have zero carbon. It's highly speculative, but you can't rule it out. So they did try to include it in the model. So we'll have a breakthrough. And see, it's captured with the orange here. And one of the things you notice, it takes a long time to even get started. Any new energy source takes a long time to scale up. And that's one of the reasons it doesn't do much for the temperature, even by the end of the century.
Steve, could you take the carbon price up to 3/4 just to see?
Have another tenth out of it. Yep. Okay.
Well, we're at 245, Karen. So
right. So it's time to look at what we've done together. Take a look at this and be proud of your work. You've collaborated and you've thought about things from a different perspective, maybe not your own, but looked at it from a different stakeholder's point of view, which is, I applaud you for that. And you've learned, you've been exposed to a certain very useful tool, which is extremely helpful for discussing things like this with people that maybe have felt hopeless in the past. Because what I want you to do is look at this and say, is any of this completely outside of human capacity to accomplish? Is any of this magic, or are we relying on anything that's not real? Okay. So so all of this is within human capacity. Oh, good. Yeah. The Ministry for the Future is a book I just finished as well. Thanks, Bob, for putting that in the chat. So Steve, do you want to take on your part now?
Sure. So the thing we want you to do at this moment is to just, like Karen said, to look at what we've done. We started out with an increase of 3.6 degrees centigrade, and we've envisioned a path to get down to half that, 1.8, and to avoid some of those terrible consequences that we imaged at the beginning. So we're going to actually have a minute of silence. And during that minute of silence, I want you to reflect on what you would love about being part of a world that went through this transformation. So what would you love about this transformation in our world? So I'm going to set my phone timer for a minute, and we'll be silent and just try to think of that question of what would you love about this for 1 minute, starting right now. Okay, that's 1 minute. And then I'd like you to go in the chat and just write down your thought. It could be a sentence, it could be one word, it could be a phrase, but don't hit enter. Just write your thought in the chat. And I'm going to ask everybody to hit enter at the same time, because you get kind of a cascade effect when you watch all of the thoughts come into the chat at the same time. So you type a message to everyone. Still here, a little bit of typing. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay. And why don't we all go ahead and hit enter now? So a lot of different feelings, quieter cleaning, maybe having grandchildren and the not feeling guilty about their lives. Doing all the changes in a timely and effective manner will be horrific and very difficult, but it'll be worth it. A free feeling, I can live without my everyday energy use contributing to future disaster. I can live guilt-free. It's beautiful to think this scenario could be real. So y'all can scroll through the chat and see these things yourselves too. So there's a lot of feelings that this exercise evokes. So I wanted to open it up for some discussion. I'm just going to give you some questions to think about. I'm going to share my PowerPoint and just, what feelings did this process evoke? What surprised you in what you saw in the simulator? And what were your key insights or questions that aroused in you? And so I just invite you to unmute yourself, make any comments or questions you have. So this is kind of a chance to just sort of debrief and think about the feelings and thoughts that this has brought up in you. You can speak up, you can type in the chat, whichever works for you.
This is Becky Benet. It's more of a question, I guess.
Sure.
I mean, I think the tool is awesome and I'd love to continue to keep working with it and understand it better. So if this is being used at the United Nations, I think that's what you guys said, right? Did somebody say that?
Yeah.
How effective at this point in time is it to get people to really listen and understand what the future really is going to be, to get them to really, to balance all those opposing views, but know that for the good of the earth, we've got to do something and believe it.
I guess it's as effective as, depends on the person, on but it does help to get it all in a visual form.
Right.
And it helps to gather all that information into one place and, aggregate it. In the full game scenario, there are things that apply pressure to stakeholders that are intractable. So for instance, there's other ways to leverage points that you can explore. And some of them might be appealing to someone's hearts, and some might be appealing to their pocketbook. So
I think too, it's helpful that that sometimes there's like a feeling like there aren't solutions, but this makes it obvious that there are solutions. It's just, how do we actually arrive at them? It kind of takes away the hopelessness of there are no options, but moves it into, okay, what are the options and how can we move towards them? Which I think is helpful, because climate change seems, insurmountable for a lot of folks.
Anna mentioned in the chat that she was surprised at how little difference some of the changes made. Anna, was there anything in particular that surprised you?
some of that depends on the order in which solutions are implemented. And some of it also, yeah, it depends on the actual mix. You'll see as you play with the simulator that the mix makes a difference.
I was surprised that the things that did make a difference were bigger differences. And I was also then, same as Anna, surprised that some of the things that I thought was going to make a difference didn't make that much of a difference. And I came out,
yeah.
I came out thinking that this is not going to be easy, but it's going to take a lot of work.
And Carla just put, in the context of today's discussion on environmental justice, I think the big question is how these changes can be done while advancing equity. Would be nice to see a stakeholder focused on economic justice in future rounds. What I was going to point out is that the stakeholders generally are challenged to come up with a co-benefit along with their proposal. And in this context, we would say, what's the economic justice co-benefit? And that's one of the things that we see, is that most of the activities that bring the temperature of the planet down actually help to advance environmental justice. So especially if they're done with that in mind.
Yeah. But I just want to bring up, sometimes you see a short-term hurdle, as was discussed with builders who are overreacting to efficiency measures, or not overreacting, who are not excited about efficiency measures because of their cost. We see a lot of those trade-offs locally where people say, oh, but renewables, oh, but it will add cost, therefore reduce equity. So we, consistently thinking about messaging related to that hurdle is so critical.
Good point.
There's usually more discussion of co-benefits when you have a longer time, and that's a big part of En-ROADS. Particularly, one of the things you can really see is health benefits, and that really benefits disadvantaged communities. Jacqueline this morning talked about how they're often living near refineries, power plants, coal plants that are putting out a lot of emissions. So as you reduce those emissions, it has a lot of health benefits for respiratory diseases and asthma and things like that that really plague minority populations a lot.
I think it's really cool playing with games like this, and but I understand there's a lot of background equations. I'm assuming this is some system dynamics, since it's out of MIT. But
right.
People playing games is great and informative, but when it comes time to make lifestyle changes or political changes or consumption changes, hell, we can't even get people to agree to get vaccinated when the threat is standing right in front of their face. I think we're going to have to talk about how someday how to generate faith in these complex models if we're going to make lifestyle changes from them and have people believe in it, other than just write it off as fake science, which I don't think it is, but you know what I'm saying.
That's actually going to be our next section, but I'm going to give a couple more minutes for discussion if people.
I think we better move on quickly. People are starting to drop off.
I just want to give one more chance for anybody who has a comment or question. If not, so I'm going to share again. So the next step in this process is to think about actions we can take. So the question is, what will you take away from today? How can you apply it to apply what you learned to the real world? And then specifically, we're going to go into breakout rooms, 2 people in each breakout room, just 2 minutes. Each of you think of one thing, one specific thing you can commit to that will help make this better future happen, and share that with your partner and hear what your partner has to say. So try to think of one action you can take that will help move us toward this future. You know, it can be something small, it can be something big, whatever you think. I'm not going to take time to share them, but I think it's helpful sometimes to write things down. But I'm going to move on. We're getting near our end time here. I want to share a couple of things here before we end.
I'm pasting resources in the chat, which is just all climate groups which are active in our area. Whoops, the chat disappeared. And also my my contact information.
So we've talked about a lot of these things, but I've hit too many times. Just here are some of the big insights that you normally get from doing this En-ROADS simulator. A couple of people have mentioned this, that there is no silver bullet. There's no one solution that gets us to where we need to go. That instead of a silver bullet, what we need is silver buckshot. We need a whole bunch of things hitting a whole bunch of different areas. And of course, that can be more challenging because you have to coordinate a lot of different things, but that's what's required to really address the severity of the climate crisis. And a lot of people also mentioned that some things are not as high impact as people expect. You know, you see these Facebook memes and things like, oh, if we just plant 1 billion trees, we're going to stop global warming in its tracks. And actually, this demonstrates no, that's not the case. It has an effect. It's a good thing. It's good for other reasons. There are co-benefits. But to really address climate change, we're going to need to do a lot of things and do them pretty soon. And we didn't get to talk too much about this, but one of the things you notice, the highest leverage things were the things that kept the fossil fuels in the ground, like the carbon tax. Because you put a price on carbon, you make it more expensive to use, and then not as much of it gets pumped out of the ground or dug out of the ground or whatever, and it doesn't get used. And that's hugely important for getting us where we want to go. And when you use the model, just remember to think about it. It's not really meant to be a prediction. It doesn't, you know, because there's so many variables, things are not going to happen exactly the way the model says necessarily, but it's meant to serve as a guide to action, to look at the impact of different things and try to decide where do we really need to focus our action, what's best to do today, what's best to do tomorrow. But the big lesson, probably the most important thing, is the scenarios that we reach at show that, yes, effective climate action is very difficult. It's very challenging, but it can be done. We can succeed if we work on this problem and look to do things that really will make a difference. And if you want to learn more, the En-ROADS simulator is at Climate Interactive. Oh, I keep hitting too many, sorry. climateinteractive.org. You can just call up the simulator, play around with it, try different things, see what happens. Also, and on the website, there's a lot of different explanations about the systems thinking and the advanced facilitation tips that they can use, that you use. And they show you different ways to use En-ROADS. You can do a workshop like this. You can do the full-blown simulation game. They have ready-made assignments that teachers can use to give to students, to let the students try to come up with their own scenario and then write an essay explaining why they did it. It's a really good assignment for students at a certain level. And you can even take training to become an En-ROADS ambassador and run this simulation yourself. It's online. You take it at your leisure, 8 one-hour sessions, and it's well done. So I invite you to try that if you're more interested. And with that, we thank you for your time and your participation. There's our email addresses if you want to reach out, although I misspelled my own. It should be SBC Global, not Global. But we appreciate your time today, and we were glad to be with you. Thanks for your participation.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and let us know if you know of any groups, churches, city council people, anyone you think would benefit from a sit down with this simulator, and we can help make it happen. Good, thank you. Wonderful session, thank you. Oh, thank you.
Thanks to you both.
Yes, Karen and Steve, thanks very much for walking us through this tool and the ways it can be used and the ways it can help open eyes about the challenge ahead of us and the need for action sooner rather than later, and the need for a number of actions. That it's all very, very eye-opening. So thank you very much. So those of you who stuck with us for the full day, thank you for participating in the second Miami Valley Climate Change Seminar. I'm confident we will be doing this again in a year, and I'm very hopeful that we will be doing it in person. So it's about 10 after 3. Again, I appreciate all of your participation in this session, and if you were joining us for all the earlier sessions earlier today. Thank you very much for that. We will be placing the recordings and the slide presentations from the earlier presentations on our website as soon as we have them all gathered together. And we will be sending out a notice to all the people who registered as to where they can find the links for those to pull them down for their own review or enjoyment. So again, have a good day, have a good week. Thank you very much for your participation today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for putting it on, Matt, and thanks for the opportunity to
You're
share.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Good to see you, Bob. Take care, Karen. I'll talk to you
Bye.
soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Karen.